understanding, continuously entrench colonial logics of the city, because Nairobi is still governed by very colonial logics that have, in this neoliberal period, are accompanying consistent neglect with force. So this participatory action research report, which talks about the larger conditions of Mathare, is also trying to indicate some of what has become informal urban governance, and that's a lot of police surveillance of young people, a lot of police brutality, and unfortunately also extrajudicial killings. So for us, and maybe I'll tie this into the theme of the panel, for us, in order for there to be a more just city, not just an inclusive, but a more just city, we need to really interrogate some of the logics that reproduce this city. So how is this city, what are the informal and formal ways in which, especially poor people who are 70% of city residents who live on 6% of the land, how do they experience this city? So they experience it not just through a lack of water, but they also experience urban governance through these informal urban practices like killings by the police. And so although we focus primarily on extrajudicial killings, we're contextualizing this in larger neglect, the larger neglect of 70% of the residents of Nairobi. So I think that's a small introduction.
Thank you very much, Koi. I mean, you raised some really critical issues, talking about colonial legacies, which means we have not rethought how we run the city or how we plan the city. You've talked about consistent neglect, which is buttressed with force. And most importantly for me, you've spoken about inclusion being also about justice. And really looking at how the largest number of people in this city experience this city. Maybe Humphrey, I can bring you in at this point. What does it look like from the City Council point of view?
Okay, morning everyone. My name is Humphrey Otieno, as already been mentioned, from the Safer Nairobi Initiative, which is a project for Nairobi City County together with UN Habitat, looking at urban safety point of view. Basically, just to ride into what I've been asked, I think, yes, we agree that there has been a consistent people from the informal settlement, and as she as well said, Koi has already said, is almost 70% of the population of Nairobi live in informal settlement. So Mathare just being one of the areas that she has, they are working on. I think from the county perspective, it has not been a systematic approach in terms of neglect of this area. And one challenge that we have been facing, especially when it comes to Mathare, this was an Air Force kind of land. So it was not part of the county, and as she as well said, that it was a quarry. So which means these were areas where the armed forces actually used to get most of their soils to work on the Air Force, which is on just across the road in terms of their roads infrastructure in that particular area. And then during the colony, some of the few can I call them our freedom fighters ended up starting to stay in that particular area, and they metamorphosized and the population has grown. So this is something that has not been addressed for quite a very long time. But with regard to issue of the right to citizen and justice, I think the county has tried its best in terms of addressing the issue of housing in that particular area. And one of the intervention, especially in Mathare 4A, and Koi knows, the then Nairobi City Council worked together with a German organization to try and try and uplift the living standard of people in Mathare 4A. And if you walk there today, you'll find very adequate houses that were then constructed. But as I said, with the urban decay and rural-urban immigration, the population has grown in that area, and I think it has surpassed the capacity of the council with regard to issue of housing. But let me also say that the county has, the city council then has been struggling, especially in addressing issues of housing in general, and not only as a council, but also as a government of Kenya, because we know that the last housing projects that were done in Nairobi were actually in 1978, 79, and early 80s. And this is where areas like Buruburu, the Umoja were done. So since then, we haven't been developing social housing for that matter. And this has seen the population grow. As you are aware, Nairobi used to be a very small area up to Outer Ring, for those who are aware of Nairobi. But now the population has grown all the way to now Mihango and almost close to Machakos. So the population has grown. We have a deficit of up to about 450,000 housing units in Nairobi. So it's not only Mathare, but it's a bigger problem than just Mathare. With regard, so one of the cognizance by the county is that, as she has already alluded, that eviction used to be one of the major threats to these informal settlements or slums. But with the promulgation of the new constitution in 2010, Article 43 is very clear on issue of the right to the housing. And so ever since, the issues to do with eviction has, there's a moratorium in terms of doing any other eviction, and the county is trying through the urban renewal to try and develop more housing units so that it can house its citizen. With regard to extrajudicial killing, I'm very sorry that this is happening at a very wide scale, and especially for young people. But we know that there is a challenge with regard to dealing with the population, especially the youth. And issues of, it's not just, it goes beyond just addressing of young people, but it's a whole family fabric issue. And I think this is a discussion we need to take even further and begin to look at what are some of the challenges that we are facing as a society, because it's a society problem. We have challenges with regard to issues of education. You know, up to a certain level, perhaps the only level that young people can go to is up to primary level. And then when it comes to secondary level, there begins some other more challenges with regard to going to upper secondary and even university. So most of the young people have not been able to venture into that particular area. So we have a large number of school dropouts, and we have also issues to do with the family fabric. You get people divorcing and such like, or orphans and vulnerable. So all this encompasses the whole challenge and the rider, perhaps why we find most of our youth engaging in crime and such like. But as a county, we have tried our best also to try and work with young people. We established a one-stop youth center, which has been working with young people to try and help them through vocational trainings and such like, and make referrals. Yesterday, I hope the former mayor, I can see him, is already there. He's been trying, actually, we established a program which was try to work with young people who have been in conflict with the law, and try and bring them back to the society. But you know our society, it's not easy once somebody was already a criminal to be easily accepted back into the community. So this is a program that we have been trying to roll out there as a county, but there are other major challenges. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Humphrey. I can't imagine that your work could be easy, planning with all the difficult scenario, or with the difficult scenario that you have mapped out. It seems that not only is it a problem that has grown out of control, it also has interlinkages with other issues that you have raised. Perhaps a follow-up question would, for me, which would be, where do we go from here? Because clearly, what I think the definition that people say of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So how do we change this paradigm? How do we change this dynamic so that, as you say, the largest number of Nairobi's people, and you're talking about a 450,000 deficit in housing, this is a massive issue. And so it would be interesting to hear how the council plans to do things differently. But maybe before we go there, I may call in or turn to Dashini. You have had more than 2.5 decades of experience in public policy, development, urbanization, and talking about issues of sustainability. So maybe you can come in with some wisdom or some experiences from your own context on how do we deal with these governance deficits that see people in informal settlements struggling to survive.
Thank you. You already made me feel old by saying 2.5 decades of experience. But I must say that as you, with longer the experience, sometimes you become more cynical and give up sometimes on the possibilities of a change. I'm very happy to hear this debate between somebody from my left and somebody from my right. We constantly have been witness to this debate in Indian context, which are sort of reducing these days, unfortunately, of having a dialogue at the local level between the community-based organizations and the local government. Two things I want to say, something that I've been saying since last 2 days is, and it comes out of our experience in India, is that when slum redevelopment or housing rights for the slum dwellers or urban poor is being talked about, the main barrier that we find in the Indian context is the land issue. I've been saying this since yesterday, but I cannot get over it because this is what we have been struggling to deal with. And given the term new high economic growth sort of among the states, this has been much stronger tendency. What is happening is speculative profits from the land markets through real estate development, and some of the city governments and the development authorities, as in case of Mumbai, from where Amita comes from, there is a Mumbai Metropolitan Regional Development Authorities whose sole purpose is to speculate on land and create large infrastructure fund using land as a resource, and many other cities have begun to do that. So what we are seeing in Indian context is that there is a resistance from the local governments to give away lands. It could be on lease basis for use purposes to so that is one issue that has to be settled at the national level. Earlier we had a very large Rajiv Awas Yojana, where there was the main thrust was not to evict the slums, but redevelop them on the existing sites, because all the slums have their logic of location, that most of the slums come up near employment centers. So to evict them and push them into resettlement sites away from their existing employment centers would mean loss of livelihoods and households sliding into poverty. So that was a program, that was the philosophy of that program, which had come up through active civil society advocacy groups at the national level, research that was funded by the national government itself, and finally one reached this program. It was in place for 1 or 2 years, and then it just got abandoned for a new program, which is the second barrier is that housing is being seen as a construction project. And housing is not being seen as a community development activity. It's not being seen as a process, but it's been seen as a product, that things have to be produced. You can have beautiful, glossy brochures of new affordable housing programs. You could flag them at the international level, but is it for the residents of the slums is a big question mark. So there is that shift. So that is one thing is related to land and construction and profits from them being very important for national GDP figures. So that is at a macroeconomic level. But at local level, when redevelopment have to be taken up if we had slum redevelopment programs and a policy of not displacing slums and redeveloping them on C2, then there are multiple issues that need to be resolved. Once again, the issue of land comes in, because it's not necessarily that the lands on which slums have come up are public lands. They don't belong necessarily to the local government, or in Indian case, state government, here provincial government or the national government. It may be private sector lands or belonging to private individuals, and to be able to resolve land tenure issue, and that requires much more longer process of negotiation with private owners. There has to be also negotiations with authorities of higher level, that is state government land has been encroached upon, then the local government has to have a negotiation with the state government. If it is the national government land, even then there has to be a negotiation. For example, a lot of railway lands are encroached upon for slums. Railways are not willing to give up, and rightly so, those lands, because this could be used for expansion, railway expansion programs. And what do we do with slums that are located on such lands? The case study that we have taken up in SAIC project of Guwahati city, 40% of lands in the slums in that city are on railway lands. And so what is the answer to the question of land? Even if we were to assume that we are going to have a tenure regularization policy and in situ redevelopment, one needs to build the answer to that from case-by-case basis, which is a very tedious and long-drawn process. It is sometimes impossible to do it at the city level. Sometimes it may be a very time-consuming process to identify who owns the land and what are the multiple stakeholders on that piece of land. But nonetheless, that exercise has to be done, and that needs to be done at a decentralized level with the community participation. The second issue that comes in situ redevelopment, if it were to be done, is that who are the residents of the slum? How do you define what is a household? At least in Indian context, I could say that household is not a nuclear household. It is often joint families with multiple generations living together. And so when a new housing program has to be done, how do you define a household? If it has to be redevelopment into a multi-story apartment, which tend to be very small in Indian context, it's like 300 square feet housing, then you can't put a household with 10 to 12 members, which is a joint family with multiple married couples inside, into one in 300 square feet apartment. And so there is a resistance from that side, because it's not socially suitable to move into a housing that I think you're talking about, a constructed house which is 300 square feet, 400 square feet, whatever the norms are. And so it's not socially suitable to move into this unless one does a process, but in that case, who is going to pay for it? How many households are going to be enumerated in the existing situation, etc. These are all issues which are very, very complicated, and one would encounter them if one were to do redevelopment on the site. And often the governments are in a great hurry to accomplish a project because it's finally a construction project, and there is very little time left for this kind of processes. And so this is what we have learned in Indian context. And so we realize that we know that there is in situ redevelopment, tenure regularization, and housing as a process is what is the way we should move forward. But it requires long drawn processes at the local level, and we need many community-based organizations to be available to take up such a process. And that's where I a bit empathize with you, if from the local government, that even if there are intentions, it does get a bit more complex.
Dashini, you've raised, I think, one of the key challenges demonstrated quite succinctly the political economy of the challenges that we're talking about with informal settlements. It's important for us to understand the money dynamics that perpetuate these situations, and more importantly, to understand the communities, who they are, and what their actual needs are. And maybe I can come back to you, Koi, for that question. With the communities that you work with, what do they consider as being the solutions? What do they consider, what do they see as being inclusion and justice?
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? Is this working? Thank you. I think it's important to recognize that this is a community that lives really abutting a superhighway that was built in 2 years, but they've lived there for 100 years and don't have even basic toilets. So I think that really reflects, if a 42-kilometer highway can be built in 2 years, but not one house for a single mother, I think that reflects kind of the lack of priority of the county government in addressing these long-term systematic issues. And that is also reflective in the new plan, which is the integrated, the new master plan for Nairobi, where you barely see one person in that plan, or in the Nairobi Metropolitan Vision, which I think is from 2008, where you don't see people in the plan. It's a very technocratic offering to Nairobi residents, who are 4 million, and it's a plan that can make an offering as definitive as having a Nairobi Symphonic Orchestra, but won't talk about the number of toilets that people need. There's no enumeration of how many people are lacking basic water supplies, how many people need toilets. So I think just to put that there, I mean, it's important to look at, even if there's not a stated neglect, it's very evident in these technocratic plans that are offered to residents. And I think what's really important for residents, I don't live in Mathare. My work has mostly been to support community and to learn also community processes, but also in my own PhD work, I historicize the city of Nairobi, and it becomes very evident that the plan for a railway town from 1898 to 1899, the plan in 1913, 1927, 1948, 1971, they're still very evident and are still echoed in this 2014 plan. I mean, the tenor is fairly similar because there's not a bid to address some of the ways in which the city is reproduced. Instead, we're offered, especially now, a very global or world city narrative without reflecting, again, on how people experience the city. So I think it's very important to prioritize basic rights. I'm not saying that I don't deny that, of course, there are issues to do with the public purse. That's obviously an important consideration. But to prioritize basic rights in these plans instead of a symphony for Nairobi, to also think about participation in not such neoliberal terms. This new plan that was released in 2014 has as one of its most central tropes the idea that it was participatory. But if you are here for those consultations, you will see that And if you participated in them, the residents were just invited to a plan that was already prescribed. And if you even look at the appendix of the new plan, those ideas that were offered in these meetings come as an appendix but don't seem to have any bearing on the plan itself. So it's important to prioritize basic rights, to include people in a manner that's not very, that is actual participation and reflects indigenous participatory processes and also people's perspectives instead of just a co-opted neoliberal kind of participation. To move away from technocratic frameworks, from these world city aspirations that forget that people live in a city, and also to recognize, I'm also I would emphasize very emphatically, land rights, to support people's land rights and their right to live where they've been for 100 years, but also to respect the way in which they have been incrementally shaping the city to benefit them. The county hasn't been there. Really, I know that there are many things involved, but the county has not been there. So also to respect the ways in which they have shaped their landscape to benefit themselves and their community, and to offer support for these processes. That's, I think, in many of the conversations I've had over 10 years in Mathare, I just captured them through these few points. But this is what people want: land rights, because if you don't have right to your land, that provides conditions for violence from the police. You're not able to improve your landscape. You're not able to find ways to, the county will not give you a water supply if you don't have the rights to that land. From my understanding, maybe maybe there are other considerations, but land rights are also very important. So, thank you.
Thank you, Koi. You have sort of drilled down to one of the core issues, that people aren't at the center of the development plans in the city or for the city, and that we're more about. Did you say an orchestra?
Yes.
Okay. It just seems a bit out of this world that we have a 450,000 social housing deficit, and we're talking about an orchestra as a prioritization for the city plan. And you've also spoken about a key issue around participation, and what does it mean, and how do we ensure that there is real and actual participation and not just the endorsement of an orchestra. I can't get over that. So maybe if I can go back to Humphrey, sorry. So at some point you spoke about housing having been built with the support of a German foundation, and I'm just wondering, what are our own Kenyan solutions to these issues? What are the budgetary allocations for dealing with informal settlements, and how much political will is there to resolve these issues?
Thank you very much. I think with regard to how we want to change the paradigm in Nairobi City County, there are a number of interventions that so far have been put in place. So first of all, just to say that the projects and most of the housing projects that have been happening in Nairobi, coming from California, going to Umoja, Buruburu, actually most of them have been funded by external funding, DFID, French development, USAID. So we've been having a challenge from the inner side, or from internally, that is from the Ministry of Housing, when they used to be in charge of the housing before it was devolved to the counties. And what I can say is that what we have been rallying and actually trying to promote in the national housing law or legislation is if we can secure like 5% of the budget to go directly for social housing as a direct input by the Treasury, so that it's already anchored in the law that on an annual basis, when we are having the budget being read, we will be knowing that 5% of that will be going to social housing. So that is one of the intervention. The other intervention that has been happening from the national government is there has been the slum upgrading project, which started in the decanting side of Soweto East. For those who are aware of the decanting site, the project is ongoing. And so far we have quite a number of units that have already been developed. And it's not only happening in Nairobi, but it's happening simultaneously in other towns and cities also. So Mombasa, Kisumu have also been benefiting from this. That is from the national housing. At the county of Nairobi, to be specific, the urban renewal project, which has been facing a lot of court cases, injunctions and stuff, is one of the, if I may say, political goodwill from the county side with regard to renewing the old county estates and give them a facelift, so that we can house as many people as possible. Because if you visit some of those housing estates, they have inadequate land within them, which we can still do new houses, and still we will house the already people who are existing in those neighborhoods, but also bring other new people coming from informal settlement, so that also they can have their stake. We are saying this Nairobi belongs to all of us, and the only way we can do it is to try and accommodate each other. But we have been facing a lot of court cases and injunctions and revolt, even in places where actually the resident participated in a very participatory way in terms of moving forward the project. So, of course, it's a political issue at some sense, because politicians from either sides of the political parties will want to undo each other, and that has been one of the challenges we have been facing administratively in terms of implementing this project. So if you ask about the goodwill from the county, yes, there is a goodwill. If we are ready to roll out, yes, even the consultant is supposed to be actually on the ground, and the designs already, everything is already there, and there have been public participation, consultation in a number of, I don't know even how many, but as we know, we are human beings. Today, people will even deny being in those consultation meetings, while we already have even evidence showing that they actually participated in those kind of forums. So I think from the county's perspective, in trying to address this deficit, we are actually on course in terms of trying to address them. But let me also indulge on issues of public participation, because that is one of the main topic of this discussion. I think engagement of the public or community in that sense is now a constitutional right in Kenya. Article 10 is very clear in terms of how people need to participate. To go even further, we have the County Government Act. The County Government Act is very clear, yeah, and it has a whole chapter on public participation. So the county is not ignoring all this. And then even further, Nairobi County just the other day adopted a community participation bill, a Community Participation Act, so which is a law. So even our county officers, they are very much aware that you can't go into you can't begin doing a project without consulting. That is something that is already a requirement in the law. So all the projects that we are undertaking, we ensure that there is public participation. The second level, and with regard to informal settlement, you remember in the in late 1990s, early 2000, we had massive eviction plans, but all these eviction plans were put into hold. Why? Because the county realized that though informal settlement were not within their jurisdiction or areas of operation, they realized also these people are human beings just as other people, and they deserve services. So what did we do? We adopted an approach for incremental slum upgrading project. Instead of doing mega project, we started doing it slow by slow. And what did we do? We begin by starting with the very basic services, water, bringing in water. And if you ask Nairobi Sewer and Water Company, they'll tell you all the informal settlement have actually been connected with water. And we have even given some kiosks, yeah, or a water selling point to specific people, individuals. And to some extent, people have also been asked to apply so that they can connect water directly to their houses. So this is already happening. With regard to issue of trying to open the informal settlement, we have done a number of roads. Mathare have just recently, I think last year or something, we opened a new road that is passing inside Mathare. And it is connecting people, because you know people have to be connected, yeah, as they go to work, and also in case of disaster and the issue of safety and security, and especially for if women want to deliver or something like that. So we have tried to do that, but it's not easy. Working in informal settlement, you have to do a number of consultation, you have to agree with the community. It is an all consensus building, because even just opening that area, you have to relocate. I'm not talking about eviction. We had to relocate people from one point to the other, and it has to be done by the community themselves to create way. With regard to the same, we are working with the civil society organization, just like Koi has said. And a best case study is what we have been doing with either in Kibera and in Mukuru currently. We are doing a mega project because we realize with the data that were collected by Jen Amani Akiba Mashinani, which why Jen was supposed to be here. We are working with Jen Weru, and they have collected data in terms of the GDP that is created in that particular area. And we are saying this is enormous. 70 billion, yeah? 77 billion Kenya shilling is not easy money annually. So we said, okay, so what kind of intervention can we do in Mukuru? So with that kind of information, it has helped the county to step back and say, okay, wait a minute. Perhaps we need to try and help this community do something. And what have we done as a county? In some of this area, we have constructed a number of sanitation facilities, actually with some of the civil society organizations. We have put in lights, security lights, and you will see most of the floodlights being put in those particular area. I've talked about water. So all these kind of services begin to help people to actually earn their livelihood, because we don't want to destabilize them. We want them, the life to continue. We have also tried as much as possible to put some health facilities in strategic places. And we are working closely with the community health workers to begin addressing areas that the county will not be able to reach. So we have recognized CHWs as one of our key people working in informal settlement, and we have been working with them. So the issue of public-private partnership also is something that we are promoting as a county to try, and because we don't have all the solution, but we know that people living in these places, they have those solutions. So what do we do with them? If they can organize themselves, and this is what we are saying, this is what we are advocating as a county. We advocate for people to get organized. Organize yourself, have your plan, and then bring it to our end, and we will approve it. We have seen Kambimoto is one of the areas just close to Mathare. Kambimoto is in Huruma. Kambimoto, this community is a small community, and perhaps I'll just advocate that before you leave Kenya, for those who are not from Kenya, you try and go to this particular neighborhood, and you will be shocked. It is something that has been done by the neighborhood themselves. They planned the area, they constructed the houses themselves. What did they do? They had their plan, they brought it to the county approved it. Yeah, so that is what we are trying to do in promoting participation and engagement with the local neighborhoods. Another project that has been worked well is in Dandora Transformation League. They have done their plans and they've come to the county and the county has approved it. So the county is very open to engage with anyone at any given level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Humphrey. It's interesting to hear how much the county council has been doing, and also to hear about the work that you've done with civil society organizations and that you actually promote community-driven solutions. I must say that I have my skepticism when you talk about water supply, because I don't live in Mathare, but I don't have water. So why is it that all these interventions that you have adequately enumerated and not addressing the key issues that Koi earlier highlighted? And my further skepticism comes with the issue around public participation. Yes, there are laws, but how far does that participation then translate into actual policies and not as annexures, as Koi mentioned earlier? I was shocked to find that we only have 20 minutes left. I hadn't realized that we've been speaking for that long. And I need to invite the audience to join this conversation. You have my apologies. I actually thought we had taken less time than we did. Maybe if I can have, by a show of hands, people who'd like to intervene or who have questions and comments to make. I've seen one hand there. If I can just get an indication. Oh, wow. Okay, so that's, I'll just allocate numbers. I'm sorry I don't know your name, so allow me to point, even though my mother taught me that pointing is rude. So there's one, sorry, I'll just go. Two, the lady at the back. Three, the lady in green. Four, the lady in blue. Five, the lady in yellow. Six, the gentleman. That gentleman, I think that's blue. Seven, the gentleman here. And maybe we'll just take all the questions and then have the panel have the last word. If you can please make your interventions short and succinct so that we can have time for everyone and the response from the panel in, I think, what is now 15 minutes. And please ensure that you introduce yourself before you make your comment or contribution. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Joe Cage, former Nairobi Mayor, and I want to thank the panel, particularly Humphrey.
Sorry, could you move closer to your microphone? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I want to thank the panelists who are there, including specifically Humphrey, for re-emphasizing and explaining very well the situation in Nairobi, in the county of Nairobi. Yes, we have had problems in terms of the low-cost housing in this country and in this county of Nairobi. But I must say the government did introduce the public-private partnership initiative, whereby the wananchi or the people or the resident in that particular area will be meeting the officials of the county, discuss their priorities and the things that are required. And in the issue of the urban renewal, through the strategic plan, we had almost over 100 visitation to all the area in Nairobi where the people are living. So we got a lot of contribution from them, and some of them, their priorities were the toilet, priorities were the health, and so forth and so on. And all those things were taken collectively, so that at least it could be done. But I must say, without the speaker, that if you talk in terms of Kibera, for instance, where the government came in the other day and gave opportunity to the young people in the slum area by constructing toilets, of which is actually being run by the youth themselves, and that is how they're making the money. So the government has done the much that they could from the national level up to the county level. The most important thing, and this is what Humphrey said, in the county of Nairobi we have over 7 estates belonging to the county of Nairobi, and with a lot of empty spaces. So what we're trying to do, again, this went through the public participation and also through the PPP, where we said the empty land, let the people come, let them build those houses which are required, but nobody is going to be evicted, because the fear on the people in the slum is if you're constructing houses.
Can I ask you to summarize, please? Sorry, we're really out of time.
I'm just finished. So in other words, we have done the much that we could. I don't think there is a fear of the people within the community, because they are working with the government, they are supporting the government, and we have our own priorities in accordance to the local authority, in accordance to the residents who are living there, so that at least they are also assisted. So mine was just a contribution to add to what Humphrey was saying, that the government, both the national and the county, they're doing everything possible to make sure that the locals' housing is implemented.
Okay. Second was the lady there, yes.
My name is Joki Wamai from the Africa Leadership Center. My question is to Humphrey, who is part of the county government. And it's in response to what Wangui was talking about, some of the injustices and lack of inclusion, especially at Mathare. And I was just looking at the report that she has shared with us on who is next and the extrajudicial killings in Mathare. At least I can see that at least one young man is shot every week. And I'm wondering what the county government is doing. And I feel like the county government and the Kenya police and the intelligence, they seem to all be working at, I don't know, or the county government, are you powerless? Can't you, because then inclusion, how do young men feel included in the city if they are killed every week? Are you powerless as a county government, or what are you doing about this? Because I think it's too much. Every week someone dying for extrajudicial killing, I think is very unfair. Are you able to do anything with the police? Because it seems like the police also is acting extrajudicially. So what, okay. I don't know, what's the way forward?
Yeah, I think we got the question. Yes, lady in green. We'll come back to you.
Thank you. My name is Michelle Mwangola. I'm affiliated to the African Leadership Center. It always worries me when we juxtapose infrastructure, such as the hardware we're talking about, and software. Especially in this case, just the throwaway comment on the orchestra and music in a way that suggests that there is a hierarchy. Now, I embrace your point, but I'm thinking of development in the sense that Claude Ake talked about it as a process through which people create and recreate themselves and their life circumstances. And I was particularly struck by something in the book where it said, after all, we are humans too. Humans don't just exist in Muthaiga, Runda, and Karen. We are also humans in Mathare. Now, I could go on. I know we don't have time to talk about the benefits of the arts, not only in terms of talking about musical skills, training for future life, those things of, okay, they may become musicians and all that. But I'm really interested in knowing, given that yesterday we talked so much about making the same kind of social amenities to everybody, regardless of where they are, what you see as the place of the arts and the place of culture in this broader discussion. Because I would really be sad to think that you're advocating for the fact that we should take away all of these programs and that kind of space of interaction that is really, really very important. I just want a clarification on that. Thank you.
My name is Jameson.
My name is Amita, and my question perhaps is to the entire panel. Anybody can respond. It's basically to do with, we have a new urban agenda which was passed at the Habitat 3 just last year. And this urban agenda talks about a right to city. it talks about sustainability in many different ways and in a very holistic manner. I'm wondering, what does it mean at a local level? And when I say local level, what does it mean for the county of Nairobi, for the city of Nairobi? What does it mean for the people of Madari? And how do we evolve not just indicators, but also processes, perhaps, which speak and connect between these local processes and the kind of discourse which is happening at an international level?
My name is James Migwi from Nairobi, Kenya. Now, my issue touches on something a bit sensitive in Nairobi, land issues. My question goes to Humphrey. You know the history of land injustices in Nairobi, Kenya. So I was asking, yes, you're building houses, yes, you have good plans, but some of these houses, some people have claimed that they've been built on private lands where the landlords were not consulted or paid. So, and some of these houses, the people coming in who come to live there, most people claim they are not part of the project. They are not original slum dwellers. So I was asking, are you following the right legislation? Do you have the right advices to curb this kind of menace and to avoid future growth of gangs that come and claim, oh, my father's land was stolen, as you know is the case in Nairobi, where the dreaded Mungiki came simply because of land issues? Thank you.
I think, oh, sorry, yes.
Good morning. My name is Simia Kanaina from the African Leadership Center. And my question is basically about, I'm particularly interested in the difference of the question of safety versus justice. And when we talk about safety, specifically in the case of Mathare, safety for whom? When we have the criminalization of residents and the killing of residents, who are we trying to make safe? And then where does the question of justice come into play in terms of access to services, but just in terms of living a full and a full and violence-free life? Thank you.
Yes, hi. My name is Ricardo Ford. I'm from the Group for the Analysis of Development in Lima. I'm going to try to raise a couple of things that we were discussing in the last 2 days to ask my question. The first one is about the talk that we had yesterday with Joan Clos, right? And the importance of good urban layouts almost as a necessary condition for other things to happen, right? Not a sufficient one, but a very important one in terms mostly of informal settlements, right? To have the right patterns, to have the right distribution of plots, to have public spaces, and all that carry out in terms of access to public services, to reducing violence and conflicts, right? But all the time that we talk about this thing in these discussions, I hear people talking about the current informal settlements, right? And that drives you to urban upgrading, reallocation, eviction. That is very difficult things to do, right? And it's very complicated. So I have that feeling that people, it's difficult to talk about that because it's very complex, right? It implies a lot of different things, and you need the state to be there to do that, right? Most of the times, at least. And we have been talking also about the absence of the state, right? We have these problems mostly because there was no state and there was no planning, right? So people had to do what they need to survive and occupy the land as informally as they can to do it, and that's part of the problem. So when we talk about the current state of informal settlements, I had this feeling also that it's like it's a dead entity, right? We know that cities are growing. Every day people is occupying land informally everywhere, mostly in developing countries. In 30 years, we're going to double the size of cities. And that people is going to go mostly to informal settlements. So how can we start thinking in these new people that is going to come to form new informal settlements to help them not reproduce the bad urban layout that we have been seeing and not reproducing all these problems, but working with them in the absence of the state, let's say, working with them, helping them, giving them tools, empowering the new communities or the new urban settles to have better urban layouts and better organizations. Do you know any experience, successful experience like this? Have you worked with people giving this training or tools? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just do a quick check. There's no other urgent hand that have come up. Okay, just be quick, please, though. There should be a mic on your table. No? If you can just shift to a table that has a mic for ease of... could you shift to a table that has a microphone just in front of you? Quickly, thank you.
Okay, my name is Eva Komba. I work as a gender specialist in Kenya, and I've really worked on a program. I've been working in the judiciary before I moved, and I used to work on a program called Access to Justice. So when I hear us talking about urban safety and asking the county government to do something about it, then I feel like we are also forgetting the role of other actors in this. So issues of extrajudicial killings require a multi-sectorial approach where we are working with the senior bosses in the police, the judiciary, the probation officers, because when we talk about boys and girls who have come from prisons, we are basically looking at probation and aftercare services. What did they do and what did they not do right in integrating these people back to the community? Then we need to also just move a bit beyond discussions of urban safety and look at maybe other contributions to the issues in the slums. Currently, we have global warming, and global warming has led to reduced water levels in our rivers and lakes, and we depend on these rivers to supply water to all our regions in this country. And what happens when we don't have the right amount of water levels? Some regions in the informal settlements have cartels that manage water at that level, and it is only the citizens who are aware of who is preventing them from accessing water. Then, as we talk about our informal settlements, I would like to echo the sentiments of the gentleman who has just spoken and said, slums will continue to be overpopulated. We are experiencing devolution in this country. Can we start making the rural areas attractive for people so that we can decongest our slums? So I'm looking at other interventions that are not just focusing on solving the problems at the slum levels, but trying to make also slum environments unattractive for rural-urban migrations. Lastly, I would like us to look at we've really invested so much in the slums, but what are we getting? That is the question I'm struggling with at the table. What are we getting? We've put so much in the slums such that we've created entitlements.
Okay. Let me come back to my panel. Okay. Definitely, Darshini has insisted that she must have first word, so she has some burning issues to respond to.
I don't want to be caught in his answers to all the questions that have come up. And I also don't want to be caught up in the crossfiring that's going on.
Okay, before you go on, Darshini, maybe if I can just recap.
But it's very interesting
Darshini,
to hear this debate.
Just recap the questions.
Sorry?
Give me a minute. From my understanding, the questions were around extrajudicial killings and the role of the council vis-a-vis other security forces, the place of the arts, the New World Agenda and how it applies in reality, how do we curb criminality and gangsterism, and the question of safety versus justice and safety for whom. And then the issues around not repeating past mistakes and recreating new slums. And then the ensuring multi-sectoral approaches. So that is, I think the rest were more or less comments and contributions. So if we could
I would pick up 2 or 3 questions. One, I think what Amita raised about the new urban agenda. New urban agenda is dear to everybody. So one would find from whichever angle one is looking at, from the private sector or from the community, from the local government, from critical urbanist, etc., you find everything in the new urban agenda. So I'm not very sure where it's going to lead us in terms of finding answers, but we can pick what one thinks is relevant. Right to city in that is a very complicated issue because as I think somebody else also raised the issue of migrants to the city, to whom does the city belong to? And so for whom are we seeing? Because urbanization is a continuous process, so people are going to come to the cities. There would be migrants who would stay for a part of the year and part of the year go back to rural areas, and a lot of developing countries are having that situation. Are these migrants considered to be citizens of the city, or are they going to be citizens of rural areas? These are all very complicated issues to be resolved. And till now, the local governments have had a hands-off approach of not recognizing our migrants because then their headache increases in extending services to them. The question of whether one can resolve the housing question for those who are going to low-income groups to migrate to the cities in the future so that slums are not there. There have been, it does require, and since yesterday, that discussions on transformative processes and requirement for a structural change in addressing this question. The first important question would be, it has been done, to my knowledge, once. I may not be having other case studies. In Allonde's period in Chile, there was small lot which were, the peripheral lands were divided into small lots, and that those were made available to newcomers to the city who could just buy them and stay there in anticipation that there is going to be migration. But I don't think any governments are prepared or doing that to allow that to happen. The other good example is of financing the households for their own upgrading or purchasing a house is in Thailand, the Kodi Community Organization Development Institute, which is and I think smaller countries could sort of follow that up, set up a national level fund for housing finance, and very large scale housing upgrading and low income housing development has been going on in Thailand in all cities using this fund. So there could be much macro level such initiatives, but it requires a great amount of structural change in the way the governments think about what they can do. And the last thing I would want to say that there is also this whole idea about consultant-based planning, as you said, but I think what we need is responsible or socially responsible professionals, not consultants who would do. And in that case, if we change the terms that we use and look for right professionals who are willing to participate in local level processes for local planning, it might be useful, and change the term from consultant to, I know a lot of funding agencies have this term consultant embedded in their sort of contracts, but if one could pressurize and change the notion of who's going to be assisting professional practices at the local level, it might be useful. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think the questions have been raised are very pertinent, and just to start with the extrajudicial killing from Njoki, I think what the county is not, it's not that the county is powerless, yeah? It's only that that mandate, it's not designed for the county government. The county government, what we can do is we can deal with the prevention of such crime and promote spaces where young people can actually engage. And what we have tried to do is through the Safer Nairobi initiative, we have 4 pillars that we deal in regard to engaging the young people. So one is looking at groups at risk, and we are looking at young people, children, and women. Women and the elderly person with disability. So we have that level, and that kind of interaction is happening with our social service department. Second is looking at dealing with crime prevention through environmental planning. where we through urban design, and this is where you change the landscape. So if there's a place which is dark and a threat to a certain population, you lit it, you make it neat, and such kind of thing. And we have been doing this through public spaces. And as you may be aware, or maybe not be aware, actually the Nairobi County did the first inventory of public spaces across the globe. And we have 1,998 public spaces, which young people can engage in either indoor or outdoor activities. So this is also tying it to what Michelle asked in terms of art and culture. So we have these social facilities that we have within the neighborhood. And if you look at the new, the urban, the master plan, the new plan, we have all these social facilities spread across Nairobi County. But of course, we know in the upmarket, which is Kileleshwa and which is Runda and other like developed areas, of course, we didn't have such facility. But the county is in plan of ensuring that this is integrated and those areas can also benefit. But even going further, if you know Sunken Car Park in town, in CBD, that place has been open for young people, for all people from all walks of life. You go there on Sunday, and you'll find people skating. Everybody is invited. It does not belong to one identity. It belongs to the entire population. So those are kind of the openings that Nairobi County is trying to do. Go to social halls. You'll see so many social halls where we are actually promoting culture. And most importantly, the One-Stop Youth Center, which is our one-stop center trying to promote art and culture. The new urban agenda, Amina, I think Nairobi County participated, and actually we had a side event in Quito. And what we have been trying to do is to promote the use of public spaces. And as we have said, Nairobi County has 1,998 public spaces. What we're trying to do now is to try and make them safe, inclusive for all. Yeah, what we're trying to do is make them accessible to all walks of life. So we are very connected to the new urban agenda, and we have actually picked target 11 and I think target 7. Yeah, so we are very much alive to the new urban agenda, and actually we are cascading it into our own day-to-day planning works. With regard to issue of land from James, I think issue of land has been very emotive. And I can say, in terms of intervention, what we are trying to do is, currently we are looking at what can we do with regard to land banking, so that we avoid issue of land grabbing. So land banking is one of the interventions that Nairobi County is trying to do, so that we ensure we secure all the land that are, and for those for people who are claiming that public land actually belong to them, that one does not exist. And I can tell you, if you come with such a case, we will tell you which land belongs to who. So if we are, of course we know we have masqueraders in the neighborhood trying to purport to own certain lands and stuff. That one does not exist. If you come to the county, we can actually tell you which land belongs to who and which one belongs to the county. On the last one, about social justice, I think within our programs, trying to address issues of safety and security, we have tried our best and working in partnership with the police. But as you are aware, responsible citizens, they should know that they also have an obligation. Rights goes with obligations. So if you are a citizen, don't expect the county what will do will advertise. There's a public participation for the following. Yeah? So we cannot reach everyone in their doorsteps. We can just try through our sub-county administrator and ward administrators to try and reach out to the population. Now what the population needs to do is to come out and participate. Participation is two-way, it's not a one-way. It is both sides. You reach out and the county will also reach out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I know we don't have time, so I'll make my responses brief. Just maybe if I can begin with the question about the new urban agenda. Kenya has not fulfilled the 1996 urban agenda, so I'm not entirely sure what it can speak to with regards to the 2016 agenda. And I would also add that what is missing for me in this New World Urban Agenda is kind of a recognition that our urbans are becoming increasingly militarized. If you look at not just in Mathare, the young people who die, but in Brazil, in America, elsewhere, we need to really take into consideration how our urban spaces are becoming militarized. Just on the question with regards to the symphony, no one is against a road or an orchestra. What we're asking for is actual prioritization of people who haven't had basic rights guaranteed in the Constitution since 1921. Also, with regards to evictions, Amnesty in 2013 released a report talking about deep sea evictions close to Parkland. So evictions are ongoing. The Mathare 4C project or the Kambimoto project we're talking about, as examples, are fraud projects embroiled in court cases to date. So I don't know if those can be a worthy example of county development. Granted, I know I'm not saying that dynamics in poor urban settlements are not complex. They're very complex. They're local elites, they're landowners, there are various contentions going on. But I think we need to recognize that these projects are embroiled in court cases. The Mathare 4C project stopped, if I'm not mistaken, it initially began in 1994, but it stopped in 2006. Maybe I don't have the dates right. Kambimoto only built houses that, like, I think someone was talking about slum upgrading, that like the consequences of that were that instead of poor people on the land getting access to these houses, it was middle-class people who are looking for cheap rent. And that is also indicative of the cost of living in this city. And so we can't in some ways blame the people who moved in, but we need to look at how slum grading provides housing for people. In fact, high-rise, if I'm not mistaken, the rent charge is at least 3 times more than people were paying in Kibera. So we need to think about that. With regards to green spaces, I think we need to think about water and land rights. And with regards to safety versus justice, I would not be surprised if Nairobi is the only city with a police force directed solely for the safety of tourists and diplomats. If I can make the connection between extrajudicial killings and urban governance a bit tighter, the Nairobi City Sewer Waterage Company, when it comes to stop supposedly illegal tapping of water in poor urban settlements, it comes with the police. So in this way, the police become de facto urban planners, people intervening in the progression of the city because they're coming to enforce illegal water tapping, water that should have been there many years before. And just with regards to what people are doing beyond the government, I hope this is in response to your question, I'm not sure if I got it right, but because we have El Nino in this, I guess everyone is suffering from El Nino, and you're very right, climate change is beyond us, beyond all of us, but I would actually attribute a lot of blame to the Northern Hemisphere, but that is another story. But climate change is, they're often ward committees who come together, not under the auspices of the county government, but people who live there, people whose houses are swept away by the river, by the rain, to organize themselves to try and mitigate the often very violent effects of El Nino. And I think this is what we need to support. We have, literally, I just want to emphasize our mandate. We are not in any way fixated on critiquing the county government. In fact, we would want to applaud it. But I think there are many dynamics that we feel that there could be much better prioritization done that would make the city more just and more equal for everyone. Thank you.
Just a quick one.
Okay.
Just an announcement. Just an announcement.
Okay.
The county is very open to anyone who wants to work with it. We are not a closed door. We are very open. But
Thanks,
if you want to discuss anything to do with housing, I just want to point my other colleagues, Nelly. Just raise your hand. Yeah, you can take it with them. They have all the data, all the information about housing and what the county is doing. Yes.
So my only task left is to thank my panel. Please join me in thanking a very brilliant panel for the very riveting conversation. And thank you. I'll hand back to you.
And I would like to thank our admirable host for taking on what was much more of a contentious panel than I had anticipated. Here I was thinking that one panelist short would mean we could cut the panel, but clearly I made a mistake in that regard, for which I apologize. So we're running about 15 minutes late. I would suggest that we try to have a quick coffee. I realize that there will be hot topics of conversation, but if we could all try to be back, say by 5 after 11, 10 past 11, so that we can start at 10, right at 10 past, that would be fantastic. Thanks very much.